Throughout history, nations have created military forces. Some become elite, fewer become legendary, but only a handful cross the threshold into something else entirely. Forces so lethal that their mere existence changes the calculus of warfare. Spartan warriors, Janissaries, Navy SEALs, Sayeret Matkal. What separates these units from every other elite force that ever existed? Elite forces are defined by rigorous selection, advanced training, and superior equipment. They succeed where conventional forces fail. But the deadliest forces in history share something deeper, something that rarely appears in official histories or operational reports. They don't just require superior soldiers, they require a transformation so complete that the person who enters training is not the person who emerges. And that transformation comes at a cost most systems refuse to pay. Persian Immortals. Created by Cyrus the Great after surviving multiple assassination attempts, the Immortals served as royal bodyguards and shock troops for an empire controlling 44% of the world's population. Warriors carried short spears with distinctive counterweights, gold pomegranates for the 1,000 elite officers, and silver for the remaining 9,000. The Immortals flanked and destroyed the Spartans at Thermopylae, conquered Babylon, subdued Egypt with 30,000 enemy casualties at Pelusium, and controlled territory from Greece to India. Nations chose alliance over fighting them. But here's what made them immortal: the replacement system. Whenever an immortal fell ill, was wounded, or died, he was immediately replaced, maintaining constant strength of exactly 10,000. To enemies, they appeared literally unkillable. Kill 100, still 10,000. Kill 1,000, still 10,000. But to the individual warrior, your death didn't matter enough to change a number. You were explicitly, administratively expendable. Your fall was erased within hours, so the formation could maintain its fiction of invincibility. The institution mattered. You did not. The Praetorian Guard. Established to protect the emperors, they ended up becoming the greatest threat to their lives. Founded by Augustus as the only armed force permitted within Italy, stationed in their own fortified barracks just outside Rome, better armed than regular legionaries with oval shields providing superior coverage, the Guard numbered 4,500 to 16,000 depending on the emperor. They controlled Rome's streets, performed secret police functions, and deployed specialized speculatores for covert operations, intelligence gathering and assassination. The Praetorians were involved in the overthrow or murder of at least 15 emperors over 300 years. In 193 CE, after murdering Emperor Pertinax, they stood on barracks walls and literally auctioned the Roman Empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus won by promising 25,000 sesterces per soldier. He reigned 66 days before execution. Emperor Commodus changed prefects so frequently that one lasted only 6 hours. And here's the darkest irony: 55.9% of all Roman emperors from Augustus to Theodosius died violently. The unit created specifically to protect the emperor became statistically the single greatest threat to his life. The protector became the predator. But to understand why this pattern exists, why loyalty turns to betrayal, you need to see where it started. Spartan warriors, the most legendary warriors in human history, the template for every elite military unit that followed. But what almost no one talks about is what it actually cost to create them. Sparta transformed into history's first military state after conquering Messenia in the 8th century before the Common Era. They created a helot slave population that outnumbered Spartans 7-1. Fear of slave revolt required every citizen to become a professional soldier. The result? A society that existed solely to produce warriors. And to produce warriors, Sparta needed to destroy children first. At Thermopylae in 480, 300 Spartans held off 100,000 plus Persians for 3 days, inflicting 20,000 to 30,000 casualties before being annihilated. At Plataea 1 year later, they lost 91 men while destroying the entire Persian invasion force. Their phalanx formation, where each man's shield protected the soldier to his left, dominated Mediterranean warfare for centuries and established the template adopted by every modern military academy. Numbers don't lie. Spartans were the most effective killing force of the ancient world. But here's what changes everything. Boys were removed from their mothers at age 7 and placed in military barracks. The Agog training system lasted 23 years, from age 7 to 30, before a Spartan was permitted to live with his wife. 23 years. The state owned every formative year of his existence. Training emphasized deliberate starvation. Boys were forced to steal food and beaten publicly when caught, not for stealing, but for getting caught. The Crypteia, secret service rite of passage, required teenage Spartans to murder helot slaves, not enemy soldiers in battle, innocent enslaved civilians in cold blood. This was their first kill. not a warrior, a slave. By age 30, when Spartans were finally free to marry, they had been so thoroughly institutionalized that their primary bond remained with fellow soldiers, not their own children. The mess hall, the Syssitia, was their real family. Wives were strangers. But there's something else about Spartans that almost no one knows. Something that will only make sense when you see what happens to modern warriors. Spartans weren't born superior. They were manufactured through systematic destruction of childhood, identity, and humanity, starting at age 7. This isn't heroism. This is the cost of fabricating weapons from children. And here's what forces you to reprocess everything you just saw. This template is 3,000 years old, which means the question isn't, did Spartans pay this price? The question is, does every unit that reaches this level of lethality pay a version of this price? Keep that question in mind, because you're about to see the pattern repeat across continents, across centuries, in ways that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about elite warriors. Varangian Guard, Byzantine Empire, 988 to approximately 1400 CE. Vikings and Anglo-Saxons who sailed away from home and never returned. Established when Emperor Basil II requested 6,000 warriors from Vladimir I of Kiev in 988 CE. The Guard recruited foreigners by design, men with no local political ties who would suppress domestic revolts without hesitation. The signature weapon was the Dane axe, a broad-bladed, long-handled weapon over 1 meter in length, capable of cleaving through shields and armor. Byzantine writers called them axe-bearing barbarians. At Chrysopolis in 989, they cheerfully hacked to pieces the rebel army. At Beroia in 1122, they hacked their way through the enemy's circle of wagons. Princess Anna Komnene described them attacking with reckless rage and neither cared about losing blood nor their wounds, suggesting berserker combat states. But here's what Varangian service actually meant. For Anglo-Saxons who joined after 1066, it was permanent exile. They fled Norman conquest because they groaned aloud for their lost liberty. The English, for their part, no longer had a homeland. They sailed several hundred ships through the Mediterranean on a one-way journey. Some settled at the Black Sea coast, building towns named Londina and York, completely cut off from England. King Sigurd I of Norway arrived with 6,000 warriors on crusade. He returned with only 100. 6,000 sailed away. 100 returned. The cost wasn't death in battle. The cost was dying thousands of miles from home or living in exile forever, building a new London you'd never leave. Mongol KESHIG, Mongol Empire, 1203 to 14th century. The personal guard of Genghis Khan, where individual failure meant collective execution, created by Genghis Khan immediately after his own assassination attempt by rival Wang Khan. Mongol tribal politics featured constant betrayals. The Khan's father Yesugei had been poisoned. Assassination was the primary leadership transition mechanism. The KESHIG grew from 150 men to 10,000 by Genghis Khan's death in 1227. Structured into day guard, night guard, and specialized archer snipers, they trained through massive annual hunting expeditions that practiced battlefield maneuvers. Selection was meritocratic, based on proven ability regardless of tribal origin, but required personal oaths, subordinating all other allegiances to the Khan. The KESHIG protected Khans during the conquest of China, Korea, the Khwarezmian Empire, Persia, and campaigns into Russia and Eastern Europe. A single KESHIG member could overrule any Mongol military commander regardless of rank, making them collectively the most powerful non-royal military force in history. They controlled an empire spanning from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. But here's what KESHIG service actually meant. The Arban system. Warriors were organized in units of 10. If one man failed, fell asleep on watch, retreated without orders, or violated protocol, the other 9 were executed alongside him. Your failure didn't just kill you. It killed 9 innocent men who had done nothing wrong. This created immense psychological pressure and constant peer surveillance. Guards who slept on watch faced death. But worse, they faced knowing their mistake would murder their brothers. Noble families were required to send their sons as both honour and hostage. These young men served, knowing their entire clan's survival depended on their performance. One mistake. 10 executions. 150 men grew to 10,000 in 24 years. Every one of those warriors lived with the knowledge that their death wouldn't just be theirs. It would be shared by 9 men who trusted them. The cost wasn't individual, it was collective. Janissaries, Ottoman Empire, 1380 to 1826. The first standing infantry force equipped with firearms. Former slaves who became grand viziers, ruling empires. But to understand what they became, you need to understand what was taken from them first. The Janissary Corps was built on the devshirme, the blood tax. Every 3 to 5 years, Ottoman officials scoured Christian villages across the Balkans, selecting the strongest, healthiest boys aged 8 to 18. Selected children were permanently separated from their families, forcibly circumcised, converted to Islam, and sent to Turkish families to learn Ottoman customs before military training. Training lasted 7 to 13 years from conscription to full janissary status. Battalion commander was called Çorbaçı, soup cook, symbolizing the corps as a family gathered around a communal meal, because these men had no other family. On May 29, 1453, 10,000 janissaries broke through Byzantine defenders at the Kirkaporta Gate, ending the 1,100-year-old Byzantine Empire in a single day. At Mohacs in 1526, their musket volleys mowed down Hungarian cavalry, securing Ottoman dominance in Eastern Europe. And here's what's almost unbelievable. Former slaves rose to become Grand Viziers, the second most powerful position in the empire. Sokolu Mehmed Pasha, a Bosnian Serb taken as a child, governed the Ottoman Empire for 14 years. Children stolen from Christian families became rulers of the Islamic world. But here's what that success story actually means. Over 300 years of the Devshirme system, 200,000 Christian children were taken from their families. These boys were forcibly converted to Islam, erasing their faith, their names, and their identities. The cruelest irony? Former slaves became oppressors of the very Christian communities they came from. Janissaries served with supreme loyalty for nearly 450 years. But remember what you saw with the Praetorian Guard. 300 years protecting emperors, then destroyed when no longer convenient. Keep that pattern in mind, because Janissaries learn the same lesson every elite unit eventually learns. The 3 stages are complete: separation, transformation, binding. But there's one more stage you haven't seen yet. The final stage that comes for every unit like this. SAS, British Special Air Service, founded 1941, the unit that defined modern special operations and the template for the cost they pay. Born from desperation in World War II North Africa, when Lieutenant David Stirling bypassed military bureaucracy by jumping the perimeter fence of Middle East headquarters on crutches to pitch his plan. The first mission was catastrophic. Only 22 of 65 men returned. But by war's end, the unit had destroyed over 400 enemy aircraft. Selection has less than a 10% pass rate. Andy McNabb's class, 220 candidates to 24 who earned the Winged Dagger. The Iranian embassy siege on May 5th, 1980 defined modern counter-terrorism. In an 11-minute assault broadcast live to millions, 19 hostages were rescued and 5 of 6 terrorists killed. The SAS directly influenced the creation of US Delta Force, Israeli Sayeret Matkal, and elite units across 5 continents. But here's the cost that doesn't appear in operational reports. Special Operations Forces have a 40% divorce rate, 13 times higher than the 3% rate of the regular military. Average operators spend 9+ months per year away from families. Secrecy requirements prevent discussing work with spouses, making intimate isolation impossible for civilian relationships to survive. You return home, but you can't talk about where you've been or what you've done. The pattern that started with Spartans unable to bond with wives after 23 years of institutional training, still operating, just wearing different uniforms. Spetsnaz Alpha Group, Soviet Union and Russia, founded 1974, created as a 30-man counter-terrorism unit following the Munich massacre, where brutalization begins before you ever face an enemy. Spetsnaz GRU was formed in 1949 under military intelligence for reconnaissance and sabotage. Alpha Group specifically was established in 1974 for counter-terrorism operations. Training includes daily 9-kilometer morning runs and 65 to 70-kilometer forced marches with 40-kilogram loads in freezing weather. Less than 10% of candidates pass selection courses. Operation Storm 333 in December 1979 saw 660 Soviet operators storm Taj Beg Palace in Afghanistan in 40 minutes, killing President Amin and over 300 guards. At the Beslan school siege in 2004, 334 hostages were killed, including 184 children. Spetsnaz suffered 10 operators killed. All 3 assault commanders died, with 30 seriously wounded. Many operators died shielding children from gunfire. The European Court of Human Rights ruled in 2017 that Russian authorities failed on numerous levels, but the operators on the ground paid with their lives trying to save hostages. But here's what Spetsnaz service actually means. The brutalization doesn't begin in combat. It begins in training through Dedovshchina, institutionalized hazing where senior conscripts beat, torture, rape, and extort juniors. 50 to 80% of conscripts are subjected to physical violence. In 2006, 250 military personnel were killed by other military personnel. 19% of all military casualties that year. Private Artyom Pakotin had prison bitch carved into his forehead and committed 2 weeks later. The system doesn't just create warriors through training, it destroys them through brutalization before they ever face an enemy, then sends them home to families who can't recognize what returned. The cost isn't just what combat does to you, it's what the system does to you before combat even begins, and by the time you face the enemy, the damage is already done. Navy SEALs, United States. Founded in January 1st, 1962. You've just seen the pattern across 3,000 years. Spartans, Janissaries, identity death before physical death. Now here's what forces you to confront everything. The pattern didn't end. It's still operating today. Authorized by President Kennedy to counter communist insurgencies, SEALs evolved from World War II underwater demolition teams. The name represents their multi-environment capability: sea, air, land. Basic underwater demolition. SEAL training lasts 24 weeks with a 68 to 85% attrition rate. Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with only 4 hours of total sleep. For every 100 men who begin, only 15 to 25 will earn their trident. May 2nd, 2011. Operation Neptune Spear. 23 SEALs and a combat dog named Cairo executed a 40-minute operation from 2 stealth Black Hawks. Osama bin Laden was killed 9 minutes into compound entry. 0 SEAL casualties. Body confirmed via DNA, 100% match. Buried at sea. One of the most successful special operations in modern history. But here's what almost no one talks about. Remember what I said about Spartans? That there was something else, something that would only make sense when you saw modern warriors? Here it is. Herodotus documented in 480 BCE a Spartan soldier taken off the front lines due to his trembling, and he later took his own life in shame. The first recorded case of combat PTSD in human history, 2,500 years ago. In ancient Sparta, surviving with shame was considered worse than death. Now fast forward 2,500 years. Veterans with combat exposure and mild traumatic brain injury show 44% PTSD rates. Combat guilt is the most significant predictor of suicide attempts. SEAL team operators describe moral injury, the suffering when things go wrong and stakes are high, harm from something seen or done. Symptoms can remain dormant for decades. Same man, same pattern, 2,500 years apart. The only thing that changed was the name and the uniform. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See what's next. Throughout history, armies have clashed in battles celebrated for courage, strategy, and sacrifice. But a handful of engagements transcend normal warfare entirely. Battles so one-sided that the outcome seems impossible. 300 Spartans against 100,000 Persians, 168 Spanish conquistadors versus 80,000 Inca soldiers, 150 British troops facing 4,000 Zulu warriors. What separates these battles from every other military engagement in history?